The descent of Ra. Evening gathered itself along the edge of the world. Not a fall, not a break, only a soft folding. The light loosened its hold on the air and leaned toward the water, as if it wished to listen to the river's long memory. Ra stood at the horizon in a quiet robe of gold. The sky around him warmed and dimmed at once, like a candle cupped by gentle hands. He looked upon the day he had carried, and the day looked back with gratitude. No words were needed. The color said everything. Below, the river waited, broad, unhurried, ancient. It had learned the shape of the world by touching it, curve after curve, century after century. And now it opened its arms for the traveler it knew best. Ra stepped into his boat. It was not wood alone. It was promise. Its sides remembered dawn. Its oars remembered dusk. Every nail and knot held the hush of first light. The boat did not rock when Ra entered. It settled, as if a home had recognized its keeper. The last of the day moved across the faces of hills and palms. Shadows lengthened like listeners drawing closer to a story. Birds folded their wings, and the reeds along the banks released a small breath, content to hear the soft clink of an oar ring against an oarlock. Ra lifted his gaze to the arch of Nut. She leaned close, jeweled with early stars. Her silence was not distance, it was care. Gabe, beneath, warmed the river from within, so that the night would feel like a blanket, not a wall. The boat pushed away. A single circle widened where it left the shore. One ring, then another, like time beginning again, gently. The first current took hold. It was a patient hand. It knew the way. Ra let the boat follow, offering only small strokes, not to hurry the river, but to greet it. Behind him the world exhaled light. Houses gathered their lamps. Children turned their faces to the softness between blue and gold, and learned the old lesson. To rest is also to live. The mouth of night opened like a slow gate. No iron, no teeth, only water darkening with welcome. The boat crossed a seam where day and night meet and recognize each other. On one side, the air still tasted of warmth. On the other, it tasted of quiet. Ra did not lower his crown. He dimmed it. The sun within him became an ember, a traveling heart that would not disturb the sleeping fields. He knew the journey by heart, but he never treated it as ordinary. Each descent was a vow renewed to carry light into places that forget it, to bring morning from the country of endings. The waterway of the Duat waited ahead. Not the wild ocean of none, but a hidden river with many names, each a door, each a mirror. The first bend approached, wide and dark. Ra felt the boat lean into it, like a shoulder taking a familiar road. Along the banks, stones kept watch. They had watched before there were names for watching. Their surfaces held the faintest glow, as if memory itself gave off a little light. The air cooled and deepened. Not cold, only honest. It asked nothing but attention, and Ra gave it. He passed beneath an overhang where the ceiling of the world came close. A few drops fell, slow and precise, counting the distance between centuries. On the prow, a small lantern woke, not to show the way, but to show the river that it was seen. Seeing is a kind of warmth. Rivers remember those who offer it. The first gate stood ahead. It did not rise from stone. It rose from silence shaped into form. Two pillars like patient guardians, a lintel like a horizontal star. Between them, darkness softly breathing. Ra guided the boat forward and spoke the old greeting, not with lips alone, but with the calm that comes before words. The gate heard and opened, not outward or inward. It opened like a hand unclenching, and the path beyond revealed itself. Inside the gate, the river narrowed. Banks drew near, dressed in carvings that time itself had traced. Spirals of tide and wind and the letter shapes of sleep. Ra read them by touch. His fingers did not disturb the water. They blessed it. He remembered his companions not present in body, but present in purpose. Ma'at, whose feather rests in all true balances. Shu, who keeps a corridor even in the deepest rooms. Tefnut, who turns fear into dew. Their names were not summons. They were promises left lit behind him. The second bend brought windless air. Even breath paused to listen. Here the Duat kept a hall where forgotten voices leaned upon one another and learned to become a chorus. No lament, no thunder. Only the dignity of what has been laid down carefully. Ra let the boat drift. The hull made almost no sound. Almost. A small rhythm remained, the slow knock of wood on world. A heartbeat for those who needed one. A figure stood at the water's skin. Not a body, perhaps a memory given shape to say thank you. It raised its hand, palm out and needed nothing more than to be met by a nod. Ra nodded. The figure gentled into light and became the bank again. In places, the river widened into black mirrors. The boat floated across their faces like a thought crossing a mind. Ra glanced down and saw not himself, but mornings yet to be lined up like coins on a string. They did not rush him. They waited, each with its own child, its own bird, its own tender chore. The second gate approached. This one wore the shape of a reed door, woven by patience, hinged by trust. Where it met in the middle, two slender shafts crossed, not to bar, to bless the act of entering. Ra brought the boat near. A voice rose from the woven hush, old and soft. "What do you carry?" He answered without sound, "I carry tomorrow." The reeds opened. The boat slid through with the quiet satisfaction of a key turning easily. Beyond, the river deepened to a shade. That taught even darkness how to be gentle. The bank stepped back. The channel held him like a wide arm. Somewhere under that arm, the serpent uncoiled. Not yet seen, not yet near. Only the idea of it, cool as a shadow in the next room. Ra did not fear the idea. Fear is a lantern turned inward too quickly. He kept his lantern turned outward, its small circle of respect following the water's slow conversation. He passed a field that had never been sown, and already knew how to wave. The stalks were made of hush. Their heads were made of stars. When the boat went by, they bowed and stood again, patient. The current slowed as if to say, "Here, rest a breath." Ra placed his oar across his knees. Silence set itself beside him like a friend. He remembered the shore above. Children closing their eyes, dogs turning twice before sleeping, lamps yieldingly dark. He held them all for a moment, then set them gently back where they belonged. The third gate drew near, tall as a memory one cannot step around. Its pillars bore the faint impression of wings. Between them, a long space like a held note. Ra breathed, and the gate breathed with him. He entered, and the wings did not move, yet the passage felt like feathers. Beyond the gate lay a reach of water so smooth that it seemed the world had learned stillness anew. A soft pressure gathered at the edge of awareness. A presence without shape. Not a threat, an announcement you are not alone. Shapes rose along the banks, one here, then two, then many. Not bodies, not shadows, but the kindness left behind by those who had been kind. They came to watch the traveler who watches for them. Each shape brightened when his gaze touched it. Each dimmed when he passed, not in grief. In completion, Ra lowered his head. Honor is a better light than pride. The river turned left, then right, as if remembering a dance from a younger world. He followed without correcting it. Let the river remember. Memory is also a guide. The water thickened a sign the deep channel began. Here the boat sat lower, closer to the long stories told in gravel and clay. Whispers rose through the hull. Ra did not translate them. He let them be what they were, words for those who had spoken them. A far glimmer trembled ahead, faint as a fish in dream water. Not morning. A room of embers tended by quiet hands. He knew the place. A harbor of rest before the hard passage. A kindness built into the underworld, like a pause between two difficult pages. He guided the boat toward it, and the embers made space. They did not burn. They warmed without asking anything in return. Ra set his oar aside and touched the gunwale. The boat answered with a sound like gratitude. He let his shoulders soften. Even a sun may lean for a moment on a pier of silence. A figure approached from the warmth. Tall, robed in dusk, eyes patient as river stones. Not a judge, a keeper of pauses. It inclined its head. Ra inclined his. No tally was read, no chain was weighed. Only the agreement that travelers must be offered water and that light must be offered room to lower itself without shame. He stayed until the breath he carried felt whole again. Then he pushed gently away. The embers receded, the river resumed. Ahead lay the country where chaos keeps its chapel. The oar found its rhythm, not fast, never fast, only true. Ra raised his crown a little, not to blaze, to remind the dark of its friend's name. He spoke to the water in the oldest language there is, the language of not leaving. I will go on, it said. The water believed him, the banks believed him. Even the far coil of the unseen serpent listened. And in its listening there was the first small change, the slightest loosening at the center of a knot. Night thickened, but did not close. Stars gathered above like counselors. The boat moved forward, carrying within it the quiet certainty that makes morning possible. And somewhere behind the next bend, beneath the ceiling of rock that remembers thunder, the river widened into the chamber where all travelers meet their mirror. Ra steadied the oar. The descent was not yet done. But the way was known, and what is known can be crossed in peace. The river drew a long, thoughtful line through the dark, and the boat followed as if reading a sentence written before speech. On the left bank, a ridge lifted, slow and patient. On the right, the ground sank into a hush of pools. Between them, the channel narrowed until water and wood spoke in whispers. The first gate stood where the banks leaned close enough to hear each other's secrets. It wore no crown, no threat, only a stillness so complete that even the lantern on Ra's prow dimmed out of courtesy. 2 figures waited there, not bodies, not stone. One shaped like welcome, one like memory. They did not ask a name. They asked a posture. Ra answered by lowering his light, a bow in the language of day. The gate unfolded like the palm of a careful hand. The boat passed through, and the channel widened by a breath. In the wake, quiet closed itself again, not as a lock, but as a blessing laid back upon its hinge. Ahead, the river braided around small islands of darkness. On each, a single reed swayed with a wind no one felt. Ra counted them without counting, dash, dash. One for each vow he kept when the world was new. They nodded as he passed, not agreement, remembrance. The second gate shimmered as if woven from night water. Threads of shadow crossed and crossed again. And where they met, a pearl drop trembled, refusing to fall. A voice rose, not a throat's voice, a place's. What do you carry? Ra answered without sound. He lifted the lantern just enough to show the surface of the stream, and the stream showed back a trail of mornings. Tomorrow he carried. The threads relaxed, the drop let go, and became the river. The boat slid onward. In the long reach beyond, the air thickened with the perfume of cool stone. Here the Duat kept its library, shelves of rock, pages of strata pressed by the weight of uncounted nights. The hull hummed, the oar ticked softly at each stroke. Ra read nothing aloud. He let the shapes of patience enter through the breath. The third gate rose like wings that had chosen to be pillars. Between them lay a corridor of feather-light shadow. Guardians stood within, 2 jackal forms, eyes steady as the north. They did not block the way, they measured it. Ra placed the oar flat and moved by the current alone. To be carried is also to be true, the gate seemed to say. He passed beneath, and the boat did not so much move forward as become an answer to a question only the river knew. After the wings came heat without fire, a low, even warmth like a hearth that never brags. From that warmth rose shapes, not the dead, but the kindness the dead had left behind. They gathered in small constellations along the bank. Each brightened as Ra's gaze met it. Each faded with gratitude when he moved on. Completion has a gentle color. The fourth gate wore the image of scales, not heavy, not cold, perfectly balanced in their weighting. No feather lay upon them, no heart sought their arm. Tonight the measure belonged to the traveler. Ra let his crown dim to an ember and placed the smallest weight upon the left, a memory of sunrise touching a child's face. The right settled, the beam held level. Truth recognized truth. The scales became water. The gate became a simple arch of dark. He passed through, and even the lantern seemed relieved. The channel deepened until the oar no longer found the bottom. The boat floated on black glass. Beneath, the world was a sky turned inward. Stars adrift as seeds awaiting rain. Somewhere far below, something old turned in its sleep. Not yet. The river asked for quiet and received it. The fifth gate appeared as 3 doorways nested one inside another, each a darker blue than the last. A thin line of brightness stitched their edges together. Choose, murmured the place. Ra did not steer. He listened to the boat. It drew a small arc and entered the middle way, the path that neither boasts nor flees. On the other side, the water exhaled as if the whole Duat had been holding its breath. There were gardens there, not of flowers, but of pauses. Clearings of time where even sorrow could sit down and take off its sandals. Figures passed among them, boatmen without boats, women whose hands remembered bread, men whose shoulders remembered doors. They did not ask to be seen, and so they were easy to see. Ra raised a hand. Their faces brightened like lamps trimmed for a vigil. The 6th gate rose from the river like a question mark. Its curve gathered the past. Its point touched the boat. Who turns you? Asked the curve. The boat answered, the promise I made at morning. Who holds you? Asked the point. Ra let the lantern glow upon the oarlock. The world, he said, by needing dawn. The gate opened in a smile no mouth could form. He moved on. Shadows began to move against the far wall of night. Long, slow, certain. Not yet the serpent, but servants of the room where serpents learn their patience, eddies that circle without growing tired, currents that tug without unkindness. Ray matched their pace to his, neither faster nor slower, and in that agreement the water smoothed. The seventh gate was a mirror not of light, but of intent. It showed the boat as it would be if it forgot why it sailed, bright but aimless, strong but cruel. Ra watched until the false image wavered, then set his palm upon the gunwale. His touch drew the true outline back. The mirror clouded, satisfied, and became mist. They passed through the mist like a promise kept. The channel twisted where rock remembered pressure. Cracks ran like script through the vault. From one crack, a thin fall of water wrote the same word over and over. Stay. Ra read it, nodded, and did not stay. He carried the word instead, so that staying could live inside, going. A soft drum began, the slow beat that stone makes when it confides its age to water. The sound traveled through the hull into the chest. It did not hurry the pulse, it steadied it. The eighth gate was low. One must bow to enter. Ra lowered his crown until the ember of it warmed his hands. Humble enough, said the lintel without speaking. He passed through and stood again, taller not in height, but in ease. Beyond that smallness, the river widened into a plain of ink. At the far edge a line shivered, where nothing should move. The oar dipped deeper and came up, trembling, not with fear, with announcement. The water carried the news to both banks. Chaos keeps its house nearby. The ninth gate waited just before that house, a doorway made of the same darkness as the chamber beyond, and yet set apart by love. It had no guardians you could count, only a feeling that one may enter if one remembers who one is. Ra let the lantern die, kept only the ember of his crown, and spoke the first word ever spoken tonight. Friend. The gate opened as if it had been listening for that word since the first river learned to bend. The boat crossed the threshold, and the water's voice lowered until it was the size of a hand on a shoulder. There at last, the serpent's thought became presence, not a strike, not a surge, a horizon rolling up from below. It stretched without end, not because it wished to occupy all places, but because it refused to be a place. Ra lifted the oar, letting the boat hold itself still. He did not brighten. He did not dim further. He stood inside the simplest preparation to remember morning in the middle of night. behind him the 9 gates closed like eyes that trust sleep. Before him the long curve of unmaking gathered itself for the old conversation. The river waited, ready to carry whichever answer love chose. And Ra, whose duty is gentleness with strength inside it, breathed once and once more and once more, until the dark remembered the shape of breath. Only then did the meeting begin, the river of shadows. The 9th gate had closed behind like an eyelid that trusted sleep, and the river thickened to a velvet dark. It did not chill, it deepened. It asked the same question over and over in a voice without words. Will you listen? Ra kept the ember of his crown, no brighter than a traveling star. He set the oar across his knees and let the current guide the hull. Wood answered water with a hush so gentle that even silence leaned closer to hear it. The chamber opened wide, then wider, until the banks withdrew into suggestion. Only the river remained certain, a black ribbon through a room that refused edges. Shapes began to gather upon the surface. Not foam, not fog, but soft impressions as if thoughts had learned to float. They moved beside the boat, keeping pace without effort, and when Ra looked upon them, they steadied, the way a candle steadies when a cupped hand draws near. They were memories that the world had set down carefully, keepsakes of kindness too complete to be lost. One looked like a doorway held open in the rain. Another resembled a pair of hands untangling a snarl of thread. Another carried the sound of a lullaby without any notes in it. All drifted. All glowed with the patience that comes after finishing well. Ra bowed his head to them. He did not claim them. He honored them where they were found. They brightened once, acknowledging the bow, then let themselves be rivers again. The boat drifted toward a tract of water blacker than the rest, as if a night within night had come to the surface for air. From beneath rose a long breath, slow, measured, and the hull answered with a quiet creak like a respectful step. At the edge of that breath, figures assembled upon both banks. Not bodies, outlines assembled from remembrance. They faced the traveler and the road, not to stop either, but to witness both. Some lifted their hands the way one lifts a curtain for a guest. Some rested their palms over their hearts. Some simply watched with the deep kindness of those who no longer ask to be seen. Ra let the lantern kindle. A circle of gold lay upon the water like a second moon. Inside that circle, a child's laugh appeared, without sound, only the bright tremble a laugh leaves in the air. A woman's gentle scolding followed, shaping the tremble into calm. A man's weary shoulder dipped, and the memory of a door closed softly so as not to wake anyone. They rose, shimmered, and became water again, as if the river itself remembered how to be human for a moment, and then chose to keep going. The channel narrowed, not by stone, but by attention. Here the Duat keeps its listening places. If a traveler speaks, words become small boats. If a traveler is quiet, listening becomes a bridge. Ra remained quiet. Listening built its bridge beneath the hull, and the boat passed over. From the right came a thin current with the scent of cold metal. It carried a procession of shadows made of duty, spears that never struck, helmets that learned to shelter instead of intimidate, a banner that refused wind. These were vows that outlived the bodies that made them, guardianship with no one left to guard. Still faithful, Ra inclined his head. The spear shadows lowered their points to the river and drew circles in thanks. From the left came warmth like fabric from a sunlit line. It belonged to kitchens and courtyards, to the quiet arithmetic of bread and water shared. Bowls without chips, ropes without knots, a broom with no dust left to chase. These too drifted. These too bowed. Their wake smelled faintly of cinnamon and clay. The river swelled. Its face grew calm in the way a voice grows calm. Before saying the one necessary thing, shadows ahead thickened into a movable wall, and the boat slowed without being told, as if the hull had read a sign that no eye could see. In the wall, an opening appeared, an oval door, a dawn shape dark within dark, yet unmistakably a passage. The water whispered, "Go, and be gentle with the going." Ra's hands took the oar again, not to force, to accompany. He dipped and drew. The blade entered like a hand entering a friend's hand, with knowledge, without conquest. Inside the oval, the river dropped a little, a soft incline, a descent so respectful that the mind called it kneeling. The banks, if banks they were, held reliefs pressed from breath. A face resolving in the moment of forgiveness. A back no longer braced against insult. An old wound deciding not to explain itself anymore. The reliefs changed as the boat passed. The way light changes a wall across an afternoon. Ra watched without claiming. He let them be the river's own confessions. The descent ended upon a plain of water, wide as remembering. Here the current halted. Here the boat waited, held not by ropes or hands, but by agreement. The river of shadows asked its second question, the one that cannot be spoken aloud. What of your own darkness will you carry kindly? Ra lifted his crown a fraction. Not to burn, to admit. He let the ember show him as he was the bearer of day who needs night to be whole. The keeper of order who requires the corridor chaos keeps open, so movement can continue, the traveler who wins each dawn by sharing the road with what would end him. He did not explain himself to the water. He showed himself. The water believed. Shadows detached from shadows and came closer. Not enemies, not yet friends. Curious. One wore the shape of an unasked question. It circled the boat, peered in, learned enough, and drifted away, satisfied by the existence of room for what it might have been. Another shadow arrived as a score kept too long. It entered the lantern's circle and dissolved, like salt in warm water, not defeated, released. A third hovered, shivering oddly, carrying the ache of names forgotten. Ra touched the gunwale with 3 fingers, and the ache steadied, then settled into the river, where other aches had grown quiet enough to teach. From far across the plain a glow approached, not fire. A congregation of little embers borne by the slow wind underground. They arranged themselves upon the water into a road wider than the boat. Ra followed, not as a guest, as a participant invited into a ritual older than fear. The embers whispered of paths worn smooth by kindness. They told of door hinges oiled before creaking, of beds turned down while a fever slept, of last words kept small so parting would not bruise the air. They did not praise themselves. They instructed by being what they were. At the road's end stood a low arch, woven from the night's own patience. Ra bowed beneath it and felt the ember of his crown warm his face. On the other side, the river rose again to its earlier height, carrying him gently upward out of the long listening. He entered a gallery where shadows practiced changing back to form. A hand learned to be a hand again. Not only the trace a hand leaves on wood, a shoulder relearned weight, and then the mercy of putting it down. An old laugh found its mouth and realized it could visit without staying. Here the boundary grew thin between those above who slept and those below who remembered. Dreams traveled easily. On the surface of the water, Ra saw small scenes arrive like skiffs from another shore. A child discovering the comfort of repeating a prayer, an elder counting blessings by touch instead of number, a friend deciding to forgive even if the apology never came. Each scene glanced at the boat, took heart, and rode away into morning. The current curved toward a region lit by no visible source. A mild brightness, like the inside of a promise kept. The river of shadows asked its third question. The most tender and the most exact. Can you love what returns you to yourself? Ra answered by placing both hands flat upon the gunwales, palms down bare. He did not lift the crown. He let the ember remain small and honest. The brightness acknowledged him, came closer, and he recognized it at last. The reflected light of all dawns that had ever been collected here where night keeps a museum of mornings. They rose from the water like memory swans, long-necked and unhurried, each carrying a singer's breath inside its breast. Not words, sustained notes of recognition. Yes. We are the same light repeating itself. Yes, we are different because the world is different today. Yes, we belong to the one who asks gently. Ra's chest loosened. He did not reach for them. He let them pass over the boat in procession. Each left a fleck upon the surface, and the flecks arranged themselves into a soft constellation that copied the crown upon his head. He smiled. The constellation smiled back and then went on being water. The plain narrowed by degrees until banks returned. Not as walls, as cheeks leaning near to hear a secret. In the left bank, a small door appeared. Barely a door. A vertical seam, bright with the insistence of a single thought. The seam opened, and a woman stepped out, made entirely of carefulness. She held a cup carved from dusk and offered it to the boat by setting it on the water. It did not sink. Rai raised the oar in greeting. The cup drifted close, and inside it the river had gathered sweetness from the roots of forgotten fruit. He did not drink. He tipped it back into the stream. The sweetness spread. The woman bowed and returned to the seam, which closed as silk does after a needle leaves it. On the right bank, a man came forward, or the impression of a man who had spent his life mending nets. He lifted nothing, said nothing, merely took the shape of a question the boat did not need to answer. His presence repaired the world a little more. He, too, returned to the bank without ripple. The river bent again, this time into a long S, that drew the boat through a corridor of soft thunder. Not storm thunder, age thunder. The sound stone makes when it informs water of its story. With each turn, the air brightened by a fraction, as if attention had become a lantern all its own. Ra placed the oar, stroked once, twice, and the bow found a current with purpose in it. He knew this reach. Beyond it, the chamber of trial waited. Not to break, to polish. Before that chamber, one more stretch remained, where shadows and light shared the same chair without argument. Here the river revealed its last museum piece, a mirror not of face, but of vocation. It lay flat as a page. When the boat crossed, it wrote the traveler's duty in water, so the traveler could read it without having to hold it. The words were simple. Be gentle and be strong inside the gentleness. Carry the morning and let night keep its dignity. Return and teach returning. Ra read. He did not say, I know. He let the mirror fold itself closed. The page became river again. A coolness gathered, clean, expectant. Ahead, the dark lifted the hem of its robe, and under that hem, the faintest line of silver drew itself from bank to bank. Not dawn dash dash, the antechamber of courage. The river of shadows released the boat with a mother's hands. Its questions had been asked. Its answers had been given without bruising. Ra raised the oar and let the current at the threshold take him. Steady as a breath one chooses before speaking a true word. Behind, the plain dimmed into a soft remembrance. Before, the long quiet where serpents think became the long quiet where heroes pray. He did not hurry. He did not delay. He went on with the patience of one who knows that even trial is a form of listening. And as the chamber of the great coil drew near, the last of the river's shadow light touched the hull like a blessing. You are not alone, it seemed to say. We go with you as the calm inside your step. Ra inclined his head, one more bow to the night that kept its promises. And the boat, faithful as breath, slid forward to the place where chaos asks for conversation, and light remembers how to answer without anger. The corridor of courage opened like a slow breath. Stone drew back into shadow. Water gathered its dark silk and smoothed its folds. Nothing hurried. Even the oar seemed to understand that haste would shatter what only patience could carry. Ra kept the ember of his crown. It did not flare. It recognized the room he was entering. Ahead, the river widened until it forgot the banks. A circular lake hidden under the world dash dash. A pupil dilated to meet the night. On that black mirror a line appeared, so thin that at first it looked like a scratch in the eye of silence. It lengthened, curved, and did not end. It was not a wave. It was not a bank. It was the thought of a creature becoming its body Apophis. The lake lowered its voice. The boat did not sink. It settled, as if invited to sit, not tested to drown. Apophis rose without ripples, as though the water had been waiting for this shape to return to it. No hiss, no rush, only presence the size of forgetting. The coil spread under the surface like a road that had chosen not to lead anywhere. One eye opened. A sun turned inward, refusing horizon. Ra did not lift his light. He let the ember be honest. He held the oar across his knees, as one holds a pen before the first letter, and he listened. The serpent did not speak in words. It moved, and its movement wrote, "All that you carry can be uncarried. All that you call morning can be named never. Be still and cease." The boat rocked once, a single syllable of doubt. Ra steadied it with his hand. Doubt, he knew, is not an enemy. It is the moment the heart asks to be told again what it already believes. He answered by breathing, the oldest reply, in like shore, out like tide. The ember brightened no more than a firefly. The water noticed. Apophis noticed. The serpent gathered itself. Its body drew the lake into a circle that had no door. Inside that circle, the air thinned, not choking, narrowing, as if the world were being reminded how small it had once been. Rai placed the oar into the circle's skin. He did not stab, he wrote, "Room." The circle loosened the smallest degree. It tightened again. Apophis spoke by constricting. The language of number. The boat replied by existing. The language of yes. A shadow moved under the hull, heavy as an anchor and patient as age. It lifted the boat an inch and let it fall, not to break it, to ask, do you float by your own will, or by the will that made you? Ra looked down into the black and saw not his face, but dawns he had not yet raised. He answered without speaking, I float by the need of those who wait. The shadow paused, as if chewing an unfamiliar kindness, and slid away. From the far side of the lake, the coil lifted. the head rising like a continent untethered. Around the face, the water made a crown of trembling. Not reverence, not fear, the body's memory of being unmade. Apophis leaned toward the ember, the eye filled with Ra until it reflected nothing else. Inside that eye lay hallways of hallways, rooms of silence stacked like closed books. The serpent wanted a single thing, no story, no beginning, no middle, no end. Only the quiet in which nothing must be carried. Ra bowed his head. He respected the desire. To rest is holy, he had learned. But to smother rest into never, that is not peace. That is forgetting. He lifted the oar. The blade touched water without a sound. One stroke, not forward, open. The lake formed a seam in front of the bow, the smallest parting like lips deciding to say the first word. Apophis turned. The coil rose behind, ahead, to the left, to the right. A wall that knew all directions. Its mouth did not gape. It peeled the world of edges. Teeth were not needed. Unmaking does not gnaw. It erases. The boat shuddered. The lantern's flame lowered itself to a memory. Ra set the oar across the gunwales and placed both palms on wood. Wood remembered the first dawn that had dried it. It remembered hands that had smoothed its ribs. It remembered the promise hammered into its nails, carry without complaint. The hull steadied. The serpent halted. Around them, the lake waited to see whether endurance could be a form of light. Ra spoke then, not loud, not long. He said the name he uses when he must cross a bridge no one else can build. Ma'at. He did not summon a goddess like a soldier summons a wall. He invited a feather. It came from nowhere and everywhere, not falling, arriving. It rested in the air over the ember, weightless, precise. Apophis drew close to weigh it and found nothing to hold. The feather cannot be seized. It only measures. The coil tightened. The water clenched inward. The feather remained showing the same truth as before. Here, in this night, balance is possible. Ra placed one finger on the oarlock. The boat pivoted a hair's breadth, enough for current to find the seam he had opened earlier. A whisper of motion entered under the bow. Apophis felt the whisper and tried to wind itself around it. But you cannot bind a seam. A seam is a decision to allow. The lake's skin wrinkled in silver. The boat slid the distance of a breath. From the rim of the chamber, echoes gathered, not sounds returning, kindness returning. The river of shadows had sent its smallest embers, the ones that walk when the great torches rest. They dotted the seam with patience. The serpent struck then, not like lightning, like night rediscovering how to be sudden. The head cut the water and came for the lantern, for the idea of direction. Ra did not raise the crown. He raised his face, and in his eyes Apophis saw itself reflected, not as monster, but as labor. The labor the dawn must do each day, to teach the world that endings can serve beginnings. The strike slowed, the way a story slows when it reaches truth. At the last instant, Ra touched the lantern's rim. It brightened 1 degree, no more. Enough to make a circle the size of a hand on the serpent's brow. In that small light, Apophis saw a child sleeping, and a curbside swept, and a grave tended without witnesses. It reeled not in pain, in recognition. Chaos has no answer to attention that is not afraid to be small. The coil thrashed. Waves rose, but rose as if taught by gentleness, cresting without claws. They lifted the boat and set it down, like a mother correcting a blanket. Ra took 3 strokes. Each stroke did not push the boat. It suggested the seam. The seam widened, not cracking the lake, unbuttoning it. Apophis came again, this time from beneath. The upward denial, the claim that what holds you can drop you. The hull shivered. The nails remembered the hands that placed them. Ra pressed his palm flat and splayed his fingers. The wood spread his certainty along its ribs. We have been held before, it said. We are being held now. The lift became a cradle, and then a rest. The serpent rose beside the bow, mighty as a continent, its eye a room where worlds go to forget their own names. It opened the room and invited the ember to enter. Ra closed his eyes. He did not move the lantern. He remembered instead the child who had laughed in the river of shadows, the hands that had untangled thread the broom with no dust left to chase. Memory is a rope that refuses the invitation to fall. The room failed to swallow him. He opened his eyes. Apophis blinked, not understanding why hunger should be told no so gently. From the far side of the dark, a thin chord rose. Not music, not speech. The braided sound of shore, air, and distant star, agreeing that breath exists. Shoe's long corridor remembered itself. Nut's veil trembled with 100 careful lamps. Geb's chest gave a slow affirmative. The feather over the ember tilted the width of a thought. Balanced, it said, not victory, balance. Apophis hesitated. Hesitation in chaos is the only open door it will ever make. Ra slid through. The seam became a lane. The lane became a path. The path braided to meet a current from the river of shadows. A returning kindness, small but sufficient. The serpent followed, for that is its duty, to ask again. It curved along the path, narrowing it to a thread. The thread held. Threads are stronger than they appear when woven from promises. Apophis, sensing time, that old enemy of always, rose for a last supplication, the plea that morning never need happen. It lifted its head beyond height and brought it down. Ra did not resist the descent. He lowered with it, bowed his head deeper than the strike, so that the blow became a cover, so that the cover became a shelter the boat could borrow. For one more breath. Under that shelter he spoke once more, the second word he keeps for bridges. Return. It was not a command to the serpent. It was a vote spoken into water, into wood, into the hours themselves. The lake heard, the oar agreed. The hours stacked themselves like steady bricks. Return, said the seam, and it opened a little more. Return, said the embers, and they traced arrows in gold dust. Return, murmured shoe from corridors, nut from lamps, Geb from the warm stone sleeping beneath all rivers. Apophis stopped. It had no home to return to. That is its sorrow. It keeps the place where home is refused. But even sorrow can be shown a chair. Ra raised the lantern and set it upon the water. It floated, an eye looking outward. In its circle the serpent saw not expulsion, but a seat dash, a place to rest while the world crossed. For a breath, chaos sat. It did not promise anything. It did not relent. It merely allowed. Sometimes that is enough for morning. The boat glided past the great head. No scrape, no scorch, only the courtesy of two labors acknowledging each other. Behind, the coil uncoiled. The lake remembered its mirror. The feather dissolved into the kind of silence that supports, not erases. Ra set the lantern back upon the prow. The ember of his crown brightened one more petal, not to boast, to say thank you to the hours for holding. He did not look back. There was no insult in it. He had learned to trust that what is not yet peace can still be honor. Ahead, the dark thinned as if a hand were rubbing sleep from the eye of the world. The river gathered itself into a single sentence. Clear and sure go. He answered with the oar. Stroke, stroke, stroke. The blade dipped like a signature returned to its rightful name. Behind him, the serpent submerged to keep its chapel and its vigil. Tomorrow night it would ask again. He would answer again. That is the treaty. The chamber's rim rose into view, cut with notches like the teeth of time, gently closing and opening. Through one notch a very narrow light showed. Not day, the practice of day. Ra's shoulders lowered. He had not fought. He had remembered. The boat crept into the notch, like a word entering a mouth made ready for it. The notch widened to a passage, the passage to a channel that knew the way. Stone backed away, water smoothed air brought with it the smallest fragrance of reeds. Reeds that live where dawn recovers its courage. He breathed, and the chambers behind him listened to that breath. The way a house listens for the master returning, not to command, to bless the rooms by walking through them. The current lifted. The hull rose as if greeted by a familiar hand. The crown brightened one more degree, and no more. Patience must not be startled when it is almost done. The last bend turned like the head of someone waking. On the far side, the underworld opened into its highest corridor, the place where night becomes hallway and hallway becomes threshold. The boat entered and Ra laid the oar flat again. He rested his palms on wood, thanking it, thanking the seam, thanking the river that had remembered to carry him, even while testing whether he knew why he should be carried. He lifted his face toward the thinnest line of silver. It trembled, not with fear, with anticipation. Behind him, Apophis sank to keep the chair he had been shown. The lake closed over the shape without forgetting the lesson. There would be other crossings. There would be other nights. Balance would always be work done kindly. Ra exhaled, and the passage accepted the gift of that breath. He was ready for the rooms where hidden suns relearned their names. He was ready for the hour when light can finally say to darkness, "You may stay. I will go through you and still be morning." The channel carried him onward, and the serpent's country became a memory dignified by endurance. Ahead, something hummed, soft, steady, infinite, dash, dash. the sound a horizon makes when it begins to glow behind the wall, the dawn of the hidden sun. The passage became a throat of stone that remembered lullabies. Water lowered its voice until it matched the pulse in Ra's wrists. The oar lay quiet, a sleeping limb. The hull moved by consent alone. All that had been clenched loosened. First the lake, then the channel, then the thought of struggle itself. Like a hand uncurled finger by finger after holding a heavy thing. Above, the ceiling thinned from black to the deep blue of a closed eye. A breath of reed and clay drifted in from no visible door. It was not dawn, only the permission for dawn to think of itself. Ra lifted the lantern a fraction. Its circle found the wall and showed carvings that had not been chiseled by tools, but by patience. A small flame teaching darkness, the manners of a guest, a river teaching a rock how to be smooth without losing its name, a child's brow learning the weight of sleep and choosing to carry it gladly. None of the scenes bragged. They rested where they were made. The current widened into a pool of listening. At its center, a mild glow trembled, as if someone just beyond sight had cupped both hands around a secret and breathed on it for warmth. The glow did not call. It waited. Ra let the boat drift to that middle and stop. Not anchored, welcomed. He set the oar across his knees and opened both palms to the air, as if there were a rain falling that only hands could catch. Within the glow, shapes gathered, then softened, then gathered again, like thoughts practicing gentleness. A chorus of breaths rose, no lungs, no mouths. The breaths of lamps about to be lit. Each exhale carried a faint gold, and the gold settled on the river the way a blessing settles on a name. The chorus sang only a single word, and they sang it by not saying it. Return. Along the pool's edge, doorways woke. They were not built, they were recognized. Tall ovals with lintels as thin as eyelids. From each doorway stepped one keeper, quiet as a book placed on a shelf, a woman bound with linen, the color of dawn ash, a man whose hands remembered grain, a child who had been kind to animals and therefore wore no crown but needed none. They did not approach the boat. They faced outward with Ra toward the part of the dark where color would come first. Time's pace changed, not faster, not slower, truer. It clicked into place like a wheel that had run beside its own track, and at last found it. The pool brightened to a pale amber. From under the surface rose a floating table of obsidian, Polished until it could hold a sky, Ra placed the lantern upon it. Around the lantern appeared 4 small bowls, one made of breath, one of dew, one of dust, and one of silence. He filled each without touching them, breath with the air of Shu's corridor, dew with Tefnut's unspent tenderness, dust with Geb's patient warmth, silence with the kindness of Nut's lamps. The bowls glowed like 4 directions, relieved to have names again. A ripple traveled from the table to the walls. The relief stirred, and where they had shown only patience, they began to show promise, hands ready to lift a curtain, lips parted a little, a path cleared of stones, not by force but by thoughtfulness. The chamber was preparing. Preparation, Ra knew, is one of the faces of love. He bowed his head, not to ask, to agree. From the far end of the passage came a tremor of silver, drawing itself thin as wire from bank to bank. It quivered with the excitement of a bird that has decided, without knowing why, to sing before anyone else wakes. The wire hummed. The pool answered with a hum a shade lower. Between them, a ladder of sound built itself, rung by rung, not for feet, for light. Rai dimmed his crown to a coal. He did not wish to compete. He wished to harmonize. The lantern spread a circle just large enough to embrace the table, the bowls, and the hum. He spoke then in the language one learns only from long crossings, a sentence composed of breaths, the grammar of patience. I am here, said the breaths. I have carried the promise we all made to morning. I will not spend it quickly. The wire brightened. It pulled a filament from the pool and laid it along the wall, where carvings woke into constellations. The shapes arranged themselves without argument, 2 boats crossing in opposite directions and knotting, a reed door opening from the hinge, not the latch. A serpent seated, not striking. When the last star found its place, the chamber felt the way a room feels when every chair has been pulled. A hand's breadth from the table, ready for guests who will be honored. The keepers stepped back into their doorways and became lintels, so that crossing would bless them. The child laughed once, a sound too small to be heard, and therefore perfect. Ra lifted his palms and lowered them. He needed nothing spoken. Every promise had arrived. The boat moved without stroke. It found a thread of current drawn straight through the center of the pool, as if someone had sewn a line of gold beneath the water the night the world began. The hull entered that line and became stitch and needle, joining what darkness had divided not by argument but by passing through. A low arch rose ahead, its keystone carved by time into the shape of a half-open eye. Beneath the arch, the river narrowed to a chord, and the chord vibrated with the name the world would soon remember for light. No mouth spoke it, no ear heard it. Still, every stone approved. Ra lowered the lantern 1 finger width. The circle upon the water tightened, became precise as an oath. He crossed under the arch, and the boat entered a hallway of blue so tender that even footsteps would have apologized for existing. He made none. The river made none. Only the hum remained, and the place where the hum was born, a door cut from the idea of horizon. This door did not face east or west. It faced promise. On either side stood 2 figures with ibis profiles, not Thoth themselves, but the dignity that allowed writing to enter the world. They held nothing. Their hands were empty, so that what would pass might place its trust there if it needed. Ra lifted his face. The ember of his crown paused. Not yet a flame, a certainty preparing to become visible. He remembered the lake and the chair for chaos. He remembered the feather over the ember. He remembered the bowls filled without fingers. Memory did not swell his chest. It made room inside it. The figures inclined their heads. The door shed a single tear of light, and where it fell, the river learned a new color. The pale between blue and gold that only exists in the moment before sight admits it. The boat slid toward that tear. At the threshold waited the oldest companion of dawn, quiet courage. It had no face. It carried no weapon. It stood with the posture of a tree that knows wind and does not despise it. Ra greeted it by taking 1 long breath. The breath returned, wore his shape for a heartbeat, then rejoined the chamber, making the air a little sweeter. Within the door, a stair of brightness began at the level of the water and climbed into the unseen. The stair was not for feet. It was for recognition. Each rung named something that had been endured kindly, a long night of tending, a quiet apology offered without demand, a hunger that had learned to be patient rather than cruel. As each name was spoken by being remembered, another rung appeared. Ra set the lantern upon the prow, centered as a star is centered by the sky. He placed both hands on the gunwales, not to steady himself, to thank the boat with skin, not thought. Then he let the oar fall gently into the river, and the river accepted it like an elder accepting a child's help. The first rung opened. Light did not pour, it unfolded the way a letter unfolds when you already know what it says, and love it more for that knowing. It touched the crown's ember and did not ignite it. It asked, "Are you ready to belong?" "I am," said the ember, "not to triumph, to serve." The second rung opened and sent a breath across the chamber. Every carving inhaled and exhaled once. The room grew alive in a way it had avoided all night, out of courtesy to rest. Now it welcomed movement. Now it desired morning, as one desires a beloved to wake smiling. From deep behind the door came a tone so low that only the bones could hear it. It said, "Together." At that word the keepers returned from their lintels and stood as people again. They lifted their empty hands and offered them to the light. The light put nothing there. The nothingness warmed. The third rung opened, and with it arrived the presence that always travels with light. Not shadow gratitude, it settled upon the boat. It settled upon the river. It settled on the halls where Apophis keeps his vigil. Even a serpent can feel gratitude if the world does not deny it a chair. Ra closed his eyes. He did not need to see the fourth rung. He knew it by the looseness in the chest, the homecoming in the shoulders. He had not defeated night. He had kept faith with it, and faith had answered by turning itself into morning. He opened his eyes. Before him, the stair had become a slope, and the slope a road, the width of the world. At its crest glowed a line so fine, it might have been a hair from the head of time. He touched the oar, and the boat began to climb. Water carried him as if it had rehearsed the scene for the pleasure of performing it well. Stones leaned without moving. The blue of the hallway clarified into the first color of day. Somewhere above, reeds agreed to make music when the wind asked. Somewhere afar, a mother turned in her sleep and smiled without knowing why. The child keeper laughed again. This time the sound was almost audible. It skipped across the river and hung in the air like a small lantern. Rhea took it with him, placing it beside the larger light upon the prow. 2 lanterns now, one made of endurance, one made of gladness. The door widened, not like stone, but like willingness. The figures with ibis profiles lifted their empty hands and became 2 branches through which light would pass without remainder. Ra bowed to them. They bowed to the one behind him, to the long river of night that had carried its guest without complaint. The slope eased. The line at the crest brightened, a thin blade sharpening into a smile. Ra dimmed his crown to its smallest ember. He preferred the world's first light to be the hero. He looked once over his shoulder, not to say farewell, to include the chair on the lake, the feather above the ember, the cups, the bowls, the embers that walk, the keepers at their doors, the river of shadows and its unthreatening questions. All of them belonged to what would happen next. Morning would carry them. It would not pretend they had not been necessary. The boat kissed the threshold. It did not bump. It greeted. A breath gathered in the chamber. Not his alone. The breath of stone and water and every statue that had learned to be alive by loving what it guarded. The breath waited for one permission. Ra gave it by lowering his gaze. Humility is the last key. The breath released. The line at the crest widened to a thread. The thread to a ribbon. The ribbon to a road of gold that did not burn but welcomed. Ra lifted the lantern a final finger width, and the hidden sun answered from beyond the threshold. With a warmth that arrived before itself, the way a beloved's footsteps arrive before the beloved. He entered the glow. Behind him the door did not close. It softened so that night would never feel exiled, only at rest until it was needed again. The boat rose on the first tide of day. Water shed its dark and wore a color humans would one day call morning. On the walls, the carvings smiled and became river again. The bowls emptied themselves into the air. Breath into wind, dew into blessing, dust into soil, silence into music's quiet partner. Ra took the oar, not to pull, to participate. He set the blade into the newborn light, and the light accepted it with a shimmer that promised fields, birds' work, laughter, and the forgiving way doors sound when they close gently after peace has entered. The corridor lifted its roof until it was no roof. The river widened until it was no river. It was a path across the face of the world. Ra dimmed his crown once more and let the lantern do the greeting. It met the horizon like a handshake given by old friends who remember how they first met. The handshake warmed into an embrace, and the embrace became a sky. He smiled, not as a conqueror, as a keeper of treaties. Night had held its vow. Chaos had kept its chair. Kindness had walked. Therefore morning could stand. Ahead, the east began to name itself. No trumpets, only birds practicing the syllables of daybreak. The boat slid forward, and the chamber of hidden suns completed its lesson. Light is not a shout. It is a memory kept faithfully enough to glow. Ra passed the last stone that could remember being sealing, and the first breath of cool, open air touched his face. He did not brighten yet. He waited for the world to look up, and the world, feeling the look before seeing the light, opened its eyes without fear. The river softened. Darkness thinned like silk being folded away. Ra stood at the horizon, the lantern before him, crown still an ember. Behind lay the quiet country of night, kept, not conquered. Ahead waited the field of morning, wide and unsown. The boat drifted without sound. Every ripple welcomed it, as if recognizing an old friend. Air changed first, cool, then sweet. A pale seam opened where sky met water, a single thread sewing color back into the world. Ra bowed his head. He remembered the serpent's patience, the feathers' calm, the rivers listening, the kindness that walked beside him through the dark. None of it was lost. Night would rest now, not vanish. He breathed once. The breath went forward and came back scented with reeds. Another breath, and the river answered. The first light appeared, not sudden, not loud, but the gentlest unveiling, a pearl opening under water. Shadows loosened, stones discovered shape again. Birds shifted on their perches, unsure whether to sing. The ember on his crown brightened slightly. He let the world lead. Color arrived. Gray, then blue, then gold. Each greeting the next without jealousy. The light spread from the river's center to the banks, touching trees, sand, and sleeping villages. Ra lifted the oar once, guiding the boat toward the seam. It was not a strike. It was a signature. The sun's rim rose, calm and exact, pouring warmth the world could safely hold. He did not blaze in triumph. He bloomed in remembrance. The lantern bowed and dimmed. The river turned silver, and fish began to write their small songs again beneath the surface. Houses woke. Hands reached for bread. People lifted faces they did not know were praying. Ra's crown shone fully now, not as a command, but as completion. The light returned and night reclined behind the day, like a friend resting after long work. The serpent kept its seat, the treaty held, and balance, quiet and shining, resumed its watch. Ray moved across the sky slowly, not racing the hours accompanying them. Each dawn would repeat this kindness. Each dusk would remember it. He smiled, keeper of the promise, carrier of peace through every darkness. The river below shimmered in approval, and the world, seeing his warmth, whispered its only prayer. It is good